The Vulcans were on the verge of extinction, crushed under the boot of the ruthless Vorta Empire's occupation of their colony world Kelshir. For years, the Vortas had enslaved the once proud Vulcan race, stripping away their dignity and hope with each passing day. Neron, a young Vulcan rebel, refused to surrender, leading a ragtag band of fighters in a desperate guerrilla war against the Vorta overlords. But the rebels were outmatched and outgunned, their cause seeming more hopeless with every failed attack. That is, until Sergeant Frank Dixon of the Earth Intergalactic Defense Corps arrived on Kelshir. The battle-hardened human soldier had infiltrated the occupied colony to gather intel, but he quickly found himself captured by Neron's rebels. Despite their initial distrust, Frank convinced the Vulcans that he was no enemy, but an ally ready to fight by their side. When word of Frank's capture reached Earth, the IDC High Command knew they could no longer stand idle as the Vortas subjugated world after world. For too long, the humans had watched from afar, but with one of their own now embroiled in the conflict, they mobilized for war. The IDC's most advanced warships and devastating weapons were primed to unleash hell upon the Vorta occupiers. On Kelshir, Frank and Neron hatched a daring plan to strike at the heart of the Vorta garrison, hoping to cripple their command and control. As the rebels engaged the enemy head-on, Earth's fleet arrived in orbit, catching the Vortas completely by surprise. The human ships rained fire upon the occupiers, their superior technology turning the tide of battle in favor of the resistance. With Earth's might now backing the Vulcan cause, a newfound hope surged through the rebels. Frank and Neron fought side by side, human and Vulcan united against a common foe, their unlikely bond forged in the crucible of war. The joint offensive was only the beginning of a long and bloody conflict, but for the first time in years, the Vulcans dared to dream of a future free from Vorta tyranny. Earth had joined the war, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the days following their joint victory, Frank and Neron worked tirelessly to fortify the Resistance's position on Kelshir. They scouted the planet's remote wilderness, searching for the perfect location to establish a hidden base of operations. After days of careful exploration, they discovered a secluded valley nestled between towering cliffs, its entrance concealed by a dense canopy of ancient trees. With the help of their Vulcan allies, Frank and Neron transformed the valley into a formidable stronghold. They carved out underground bunkers, erected camouflage watchtowers, and stockpiled weapons and supplies. From this secret base, they began to coordinate a series of calculated strikes against key Vorta installations. Small teams of Vulcan rebels, armed with intelligence gathered by Frank's IDC contacts, infiltrated enemy supply depots and communication hubs. They planted explosives, sabotaged equipment, and disappeared into the shadows, leaving chaos in their wake. Each successful operation dealt a blow to the Vorta occupiers, weakening their grip on Kelshir. As whispers of the rebellion's victories spread across the planet, other Vulcan resistance cells began to emerge from hiding. Neron reached out to these groups, inviting them to join forces with the growing coalition. In clandestine meetings held deep within the wilderness, Vulcan leaders from across Kelshir gathered to forge an alliance, united in their persistence to reclaim their world. Yet even as the resistance grew in strength, a new threat loomed on the horizon. The Vorta High Command, enraged by the rebels' brazen attacks, dispatched a notorious warlord to crush the uprising. Kravox the Merciless, a name spoken in fearful whispers across the galaxy, arrived on Kelshir with a massive fleet, his ships darkening the skies above the planet's capital city. Frank, realizing the grave danger posed by Kravox's arrival, wasted no time in contacting his superiors at the IDC. He requested immediate reinforcements, knowing that the resistance would need all the help it could get to withstand the coming onslaught. The IDC responded swiftly, dispatching a detachment of their most elite soldiers to bolster the rebels' ranks. Among these reinforcements was Zara Hernandez, a brilliant tactician with a reputation for unconventional warfare. As she stepped off the transport ship and onto the surface of Kelshir, Zara could sense the tension in the air, the weight of the task that lay ahead. She knew that the fate of an entire world rested on the success of their mission. Frank and Neron welcomed Zara and her team, quickly integrating them into the Resistance's command structure. As they gathered around a holographic map of Kelshir, Zara proposed a daring plan to strike at the heart of the Vorta occupation. She suggested infiltrating Kravox's command ship and sabotaging its communications network, effectively blinding the Vorta forces to the movements of the rebels on the ground. Niran studied the map, his brow furrowed in concentration. "It's a risky move," he said, "but it could give us the edge we need. If we can disrupt their coordination, we stand a better chance of catching them off guard." Frank nodded in agreement. "We'll need our best fighters for this mission. Zara, you'll lead the infiltration team. Choose your operatives carefully." As Zara and her hand-picked team prepared for their perilous mission, Frank and Niran turned their attention to the task of drawing Kravox's gaze away from the true threat. They planned a series of diversionary attacks across Kelshir, targeting Vorta strongholds and supply lines. The stage was set for a climactic confrontation that would determine the fate of Kelshir and the galaxy at large. As the resistance fighters readied their weapons and steeled their grit, they knew that the coming battle would be their greatest test yet. But with the might of Earth and the indomitable spirit of the Vulcan people on their side, they dared to hope that victory was within reach. As dawn broke over Kelshir, Zara Hernandez and her team crouched in the shadows of the Vorta command ship's docking bay. Their pulse rifles were primed, faces set with unbreakable spirit. Zara raised a hand, signaling the advance. They moved swiftly and silently through the cavernous space, their footsteps muffled by the low hum of machinery. The corridors of the ship stretched before them like a maze, but Zara had memorized the layout. She led her team through a series of quick turns and hidden access ways, avoiding the main thoroughfares where Vorta crewmen bustled about their duties. The air grew thick with tension as they neared the communications center. "There," Zara whispered, gesturing to a heavily fortified door. "Jax, you're up." A lanky technician stepped forward, attaching a small device to the door's control panel. It beeped softly, and the lock disengaged with a soft click. The team slipped inside, finding themselves surrounded by banks of computers and holographic displays. "Fan out," Zara ordered. "You know your targets. Let's make this quick and clean." As her team set to work, Zara kept watch, her heart pounding in her ears. Every second felt like an eternity, the risk of discovery growing with each passing moment. Meanwhile, on the surface of Kelshir, Frank and Niran led their forces in a daring assault on a Vorta supply depot. The night air crackled with energy weapons fire as the rebels emerged from the underbrush, catching the enemy off guard. "Push forward," Frank shouted, ducking behind a low wall as return fire sizzled overhead. "We need to draw their attention away from the command ship." Niran moved with fluid grace, his Vulcan strength and agility allowing him to close the distance to the enemy lines. He engaged a Vorta soldier in hand-to-hand combat, disarming him with a precise strike before using the captured weapon to take down two more. The battle raged on, the rebels striking hard and fast before melting back into the wilderness. As they regrouped in a secluded clearing, Frank received an urgent transmission from one of their informants in the capital. "Kravox is planning to attack civilian centers," he told Niran, his face grim. "We need to stop him before innocent lives are lost." Niran's eyes narrowed as he considered their options. "The canyons," he said suddenly. "We can use the terrain to our advantage. If we can lure Kravox's forces into the Kelshir Badlands, we might stand a chance." Frank nodded, a plan already forming in his mind. He activated his comlink, contacting the IDC fleet in orbit. "This is Sergeant Dixon. We need air support for a major offensive in the Badlands. Prepare for my signal." As they set their trap, Zara and her team completed their sabotage of the Vorta command ship's systems. Alarms blared as they fought their way back to the extraction point, narrowly evading security forces. "Move! Move!" Zara shouted as they piled into a stolen dropship. The vessel roared to life, blasting out of the docking bay and into the star-filled sky of Kelshir. On the ground, Frank and Niran watched as Kravox's forces marched into the narrow confines of the canyon. The warlord himself stood atop a massive war machine, his armor gleaming in the harsh sunlight. "Now!" Frank bellowed, and the canyon erupted with weapons fire from all directions. IDC dropships swooped in, raining destruction upon the Vorta lines. The enemy's technological advantage meant little in the close quarters of the ravine, where rebel fighters struck from hidden positions with deadly precision. In the chaos of battle, Frank and Niran fought their way towards Kravox, cutting down his personal guard. The Vorta warlord leapt from his war machine, landing before them with a thunderous impact. "You dare challenge me?" Kravox roared, his voice carrying over the din of combat. "I am Kravox the Merciless. I will crush you beneath my heel." Frank stepped forward, his rifle raised. "Your reign of terror ends today, Kravox. Surrender, and we might show you mercy." The warlord's response was a savage laugh as he charged forward, his massive frame a blur of motion. Frank and Niran found themselves locked in a desperate struggle, barely holding their own against Kravox's inhuman strength. Just as it seemed they might falter, a familiar voice cut through the air. "Need a hand, boys?" Zara's dropship appeared overhead, its weapons blazing. She leapt from the open hatch, landing beside Frank and Niran with her rifle already firing. Together they pressed the attack, driving Kravox back step by step. The warlord, realizing the tide had turned against him, snarled in defiance. "If I am to fall, I will take you with me." He lunged at Frank, his massive fist swinging with deadly force. Frank ducked under the blow, years of combat training guiding his movements. He struck back, landing a series of punishing blows that drove Kravox to his knees. With a final devastating strike, Frank sent the warlord crashing to the ground. As Kravox lay defeated, the remaining Vorta forces began to surrender. The canyon fell silent, save for the cheers of the victorious rebels. Frank, Niran, and Zara stood together, battered but triumphant, as the first rays of a new dawn broke over the liberated world of Kelshir. Kelshir. The victory was hard won, but Frank knew it was only the beginning. As the dust settled and the remaining Vorta forces surrendered, Frank's comm unit crackled to life. Admiral Zhao's holographic image flickered into view, his expression a mix of pride and urgency. "Excellent work, Sergeant Dixon, but we can't rest on our laurels. The Vorta Empire is in disarray, and we need to press our advantage." Frank nodded, wiping sweat and grime from his brow. "What's our next move, Admiral?" "We've received reports of a massive civilian uprising on Trallius. The Vorta are responding with extreme force. We need you and your team to spearhead a liberation effort." Zara stepped forward, her eyes blazing with tenacity. "Trallius is a major industrial hub. If we can secure it, we'll deal a crippling blow to the Vorta war machine." Frank turned to Niran, who was tending to wounded rebels nearby. The Vulcan met his gaze and gave a slight nod. No words were needed. They were in this together. Over the next few days, Frank, Zara, and Niran worked tirelessly to assemble a joint human-Vulcan strike force. Their ranks swelled with Trallian refugees, eager to liberate their homeworld. Among them was Kellara, a fierce warrior whose eyes burned with the pain of her people's suffering. "The Vorta will pay for what they've done to Trallius," Kellara growled as she sharpened her blade. "My people cry out for justice." Zara placed a hand on the Trallian shoulder. "And we'll help you deliver it. But first, we need to disable their orbital defenses." The plan was audacious. A small team would infiltrate Trallius's planetary defense grid, disabling the Vorta's orbital weapons platforms. This would pave the way for a full-scale ground assault. As their stealth shuttle approached Trallius, Frank's stomach churned at the sight of the planet below. Vast swathes of the surface were scorched black, the aftermath of Vorta bombardments. Scattered fires still burned in what had once been sprawling cities. "Entering the atmosphere now," Zara announced from the pilot's seat. "Prepare for insertion." The shuttle touched down in a remote mountain range, far from the nearest Vorta outpost. Frank led the way, his rifle sweeping the rocky terrain as they made their way towards the defense grid's central node. Hours of grueling hiking later, they crouched at the edge of a cliff overlooking the Vorta facility. Massive dishes and antennae dotted the complex, surrounded by a ring of heavily armed guards. "I count at least 30 hostiles," Niran whispered, his keen Vulcan eyes picking out details in the gathering dusk. Kellara unsheathed her blade, a wicked curve of Trallian steel. "Then they are outnumbered." Frank raised a hand, silencing the team. "We do this smart. Zara, you're our tech expert. Once we clear a path, you'll have 10 minutes to disable the grid before their systems detect the intrusion." Zara nodded, her fingers dancing over the hollow display of her wrist computer. "I'll make it 5. The assault was swift and brutal. Frank and Niran led the charge, their weapons spitting silent death as they cut through the Vorta's outer defenses. Kelara moved like a shadow, her blade flashing in the starlight as she dispatched guards with terrifying efficiency. Alarms blared as they fought their way to the central control room. Frank took a glancing blow to his shoulder, his armor absorbing most of the impact. He gritted his teeth against the pain and pressed on. "We're in!" Zara shouted as the doors hissed open. Her fingers flew across the alien console, bypassing security protocols and overriding failsafes. "Orbital platforms shutting down! Now!" A series of distant explosions lit up the night sky as the Vorta's orbital defenses self-destructed. Frank allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction before keying his comm unit. "This is Sergeant Dixon. Trallius is open for business. Bring the rain." The response was immediate. The sky erupted with streaks of fire as IDC warships dropped out of warp, their weapons blazing. On the ground, the Trallian uprising surged forward with renewed vigor, bolstered by the arrival of human and Vulcan reinforcements. For 3 days and nights, the battle for Trallius raged. Frank lost count of the firefights, the close calls, the fallen comrades. But in the end, they stood victorious amidst the rubble of the Vorta's last stronghold. As the adrenaline of combat faded, the enormity of what lay ahead began to sink in. Trallius was free, but the scars of occupation ran deep. Zara found herself thrust into a new role, overseeing the planet's reconstruction and governance. "I'm a soldier, not a politician," she protested to Admiral Zhao's hologram. The Admiral's expression was sympathetic but firm. "You're what they need right now, Captain Hernandez. Yes, that's a promotion. You've earned it." Zara's new command came with a seasoned advisor, Marcus Rath, a grizzled veteran of Earth's diplomatic corps. His first words to her set the tone for their relationship. "Don't get any grandiose ideas about remaking this world in Earth's image, Captain. Our job is to stabilize, not revolutionize." Zara bristled at his cynicism, but recognized the value of his experience. As she walked the rubble-strewn streets of Trallius's capital, she felt the weight of a planet's future on her shoulders. Trallian civilians emerged from hiding, their faces a mix of hope and wariness. Kelara fell into step beside her, the warrior's presence a comforting reminder of the bonds forged in battle. "My people are strong," Kelara said, her voice low. "We will rebuild, but we will need help to guard against the Vorta's return." Zara nodded, her mind already racing with plans and contingencies. The war was nowhere near the end, and Trallius would be a tempting target for Vorta reprisals. But as she watched humans, Vulcans, and Trallians working side by side to clear debris and tend to the wounded, she felt a spark of hope. "We'll face whatever comes together," she said, squaring her shoulders. "Now, let's get to work." "Work." Zara's words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of responsibility. Months passed as Trallius slowly recovered. The planet's industrial capacity, once harnessed for Vorta war machines, now churned out the tools of reconstruction. Zara found herself thrust into the role of diplomat and administrator, mediating disputes and coordinating relief efforts. One muggy evening, as she pored over resource allocation reports in her makeshift office, a priority transmission from Admiral Zhao interrupted her work. "Captain Hernandez, our intelligence has uncovered something big." The Admiral's hologram flickered to life, his face etched with tension. "We've located the Vorta Empire's central command on Vortra." Zara leaned forward, her fatigue forgotten. "Their homeworld? That's been classified for centuries." Zhao nodded. "Exactly. And it's protected by the most formidable defenses we've ever encountered. A direct assault would be suicide." "So what's the play?" The Admiral's lips curved into a grim smile. "How do you feel about a little smuggling operation?" Within days, Zara found herself aboard a stolen Vorta freighter, its hull scarred and its systems jury-rigged. Frank, Niran, and Kelara stood beside her on the bridge, a hand-picked crew of the best operatives Earth, Vulcan, and Trallius had to offer. "Approaching Vortara system," Niran announced, his fingers dancing over the alien controls. "Initiating docking protocols." Zara's heart pounded as they glided past massive Vorta warships, praying their falsified manifest would hold up to scrutiny. After an agonizing wait, they received clearance to land. The team disembarked in the bowels of Vortara's industrial sector, a maze of towering factories and cramped worker habitats. The air hung thick with metallic fumes and the constant drone of machinery. "Contacts this way," Frank muttered, leading them through winding alleys. They met their Vorta dissident informant in the shadows of a derelict processing plant. "The ion cannon battery," the informant whispered, passing them a data chip. "It's our best shot at bringing down the planetary shields." Zara studied the schematics, her mind racing. "We'll split up. Neron, you're with me on the cannon. Frank, take Kellara and hit their command bunker. Comms silent unless absolutely necessary." The team parted ways, melting into the industrial sprawl. Zara and Neron made their way to the outskirts of the city, where the ancient ion cannon loomed against the purple Vorteran sky. "Security's lighter than expected," Neron observed as they approached the perimeter. Zara nodded. "Overconfidence, let's make them regret it." They struck with surgical precision, neutralizing the guards before an alarm could be raised. Inside the control room, Zara's fingers flew across unfamiliar consoles, overriding safeties and redirecting power. "Shields are down," she breathed, watching status indicators flicker and die. "Your turn, Frank." Across the city, Frank and Kellara crouched in the shadows of the central command bunker. They had infiltrated deep into the complex, evading patrols through a combination of stealth and well-timed distractions. "Almost there," Frank whispered, eyeing the entrance to the main communications hub. "On my mark." They burst into action, catching the Vorta technicians completely off guard. In seconds, the room was secured. Kellara stood watch while Frank worked his magic on the alien systems. "Comms are scrambled," he reported. "Their fleet's flying blind up there." The response was immediate. The sky above Vortara erupted in flame as the IDC fleet, lying in wait beyond the system's edge, unleashed a devastating barrage. Vorta shipyards and military installations crumbled under the assault. Amidst the chaos, Zara's team regrouped and pushed deeper into the heart of the Vorta command structure. They fought their way through confused and disorganized resistance, finally breaching a heavily fortified blast door. Inside, they found themselves face-to-face with the Vorta Supreme Commander and his elite guard. The alien leader's eyes blazed with fury as he raised a ceremonial weapon. "You dare invade the sacred soil of Vortara?" he snarled. "I'll see your worlds burn for this." Zara raised her rifle, her voice steady. "It's over. Surrender now, and we can end this without further bloodshed." The Supreme Commander's response was a battle cry as he and his guards charged forward. The room erupted in a furious firefight, energy weapons sizzling through the air. Frank ducked behind a console, returning fire. "We need him alive!" Neron moved with impossible speed, disarming one guard after another. Kellara's blade flashed, leaving a trail of incapacitated foes in her wake. Zara found herself locked in close combat with the Supreme Commander himself. She deflected a vicious blow from his weapon, feeling the impact reverberate through her bones. With a swift kick, she sent the alien leader staggering back. "Now!" she shouted. Frank and Neron pounced, tackling the Supreme Commander to the ground. After a brief struggle, they secured his arms behind his back. Zara stood over the captured leader, her chest heaving. "Contact Admiral Zhao. Let him know the Vorta Empire has fallen." As reports of Vorta forces surrendering across the galaxy flooded in, Zara gazed out at the burning skyline of the conquered capital. She knew the real work was just beginning. Zara's comm unit chirped, interrupting her contemplation of Vortara's smoldering skyline. Admiral Zhao's hologram materialized, his face etched with a mixture of triumph and concern. "Captain Hernandez, outstanding work. The fall of Vortara has sent shockwaves across the galaxy. But we can't afford to rest on our laurels. I need you back on Trallius immediately for an emergency summit." Within hours, Zara found herself in a hastily converted war room, surrounded by the key figures of the resistance. Frank, still nursing a wound from the Vorteran assault, stood at attention near the door. Neron's Vulcan features were impassive as ever, but his eyes betrayed a hint of fatigue. Kellara paced restlessly, her blade never far from her hand. Admiral Zhao's hologram dominated the center of the room. The Vorta Empire is fracturing. We have reports of warlords and governors scrambling for power across dozens of systems. This is our chance to strike decisively. Zara leaned forward, studying the holographic star map. We need to prioritize our targets. What's most critical? The shipyards at Krios Prime, Frank interjected, pointing to a pulsing red icon. If we can seize those, we'll cripple the Vortas' ability to replenish their fleet. Neron nodded in agreement. Logical, and I suggest a simultaneous assault on the Aralis moons. Their mineral wealth is fueling the Vorta war machine. For hours, they debated strategy and resource allocation. As the plans took shape, Zara felt a growing unease. The scope of their ambition was staggering, and the complexities of coordinating such a massive offensive were daunting. There's one more thing, Admiral Zhao said as the meeting wound down. We need a unified command structure, a political body to govern the liberated systems. The resistance leadership is proposing a council of allied systems. A murmur rippled through the room. Kellara's eyes narrowed. And who would lead this council? All eyes turned to Zara. She felt the weight of their expectations settle on her shoulders like a physical burden. I'm a soldier, not a politician, she protested weakly. Admiral Zhao's hologram flickered as he shook his head. You're what we need, Zara, a unifying figure who's proven herself in battle and earned the trust of multiple species. The council has already voted. You're our best hope. The next weeks passed in a blur of frantic activity. Zara found herself thrust into a world of diplomacy and governance, navigating the treacherous waters of interspecies politics while coordinating massive military operations. Frank's assault on Krios Prime was a resounding success. Zara watched the real-time feeds as human and Trallian forces stormed the shipyards, overwhelming the Vorta defenders. The sight of captured Vorta warships being repurposed for the resistance sent a surge of hope through the Allied systems. Neron's campaign on the Aralis moons proved equally decisive. His Vulcan precision, combined with the raw grit of the liberated miners, secured a vital resource base for the fledgling alliance. But with each victory came new challenges. Zara found herself mediating an increasingly hostile dispute between Kellara and Neron. Centuries of mistrust between their species threatened to boil over into open conflict. The Vulcans claim they need access to our sacred forest for their meditation rituals, Kellara snarled during one particularly heated council session. But we all know they covet our life-extending tree sap. Neron's response was measured but firm. Your accusations are illogical and without basis. We seek only to preserve the cultural practices that define our people. Zara massaged her temples, feeling a headache building. Both of your concerns are valid. We'll establish a joint committee to draft guidelines for shared access to these resources. This alliance only works if we respect each other's needs. As if interspecies tensions weren't enough, a new threat emerged from within humanity itself. General Haskell, a decorated Earth Force veteran, began openly questioning Zara's leadership. We've bled and died to liberate these worlds, Haskell proclaimed to a crowd of cheering human colonists. And now we're expected to take orders from aliens? To share the spoils of our victory with races who sat on the sidelines while Earth burned? His Terran supremacist movement gained traction among disaffected humans, particularly those who had lost homes and loved ones to the Vorta occupation. Zara knew she needed to address this growing divide before it fractured the alliance. But before she could formulate a response, an urgent transmission from the outer defense perimeter demanded her attention. The long-range sensors had detected a massive energy signature. As the data streamed in, Zara felt her blood run cold. A Vorta armada of unprecedented size was assembling at the edge of known space. At its heart was a behemoth of a command ship, overflowing with weapons that made the orbital platforms of Trallius look like toys. Overlord Thraxus, Neron breathed, recognizing the unique energy signature of the Vorta leader's flagship. Zara's mind raced, calculating force dispositions and defensive capabilities. She keyed her comm unit, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her gut. This is Council Leader Hernandez to all Allied commands. Code Omega. I repeat, Code Omega. This is not a drill. As klaxons blared and ships scrambled to defensive positions, Zara turned to face her assembled advisors. The weight of an entire galaxy's future pressed down upon her. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos, "this is the moment that will define us. Everything we've fought for comes down to this. Let's show Thraxus and his Vorta dogs what a truly united galaxy can do." The massive Vorta armada materialized at the edge of Allied space, a sea of warships that blotted out the stars. At its center loomed Overlord Thraxus's command ship, dripping with weaponry that made even the most battle-hardened veterans tremble. Zara's voice cut through the stunned silence of the war room. "We can't match them, ship for ship, but we can outsmart them." She zoomed in on a holographic display of Horizon Alpha. "We'll use the station as bait. A skeleton crew makes it look vulnerable, while our fleets wait to spring the trap." Neron nodded, his Vulcan features betraying a hint of concern. "I will lead the crew aboard Horizon Alpha. The risk is acceptable." As the Allied fleets dispersed to their hidden positions behind a dense asteroid field, Zara gripped Neron's shoulder. "May your logic serve you well, old friend." The Vorta armada approached with predatory grace. Thraxus, overconfident in his overwhelming force, took the bait. A strike force peeled off towards Horizon Alpha while the main fleet pressed onward. "Now!" Frank's voice crackled over the comm. Human and Trallian ships erupted from their concealment, catching the Vorta in a devastating crossfire. Space itself seemed to ignite as energy weapons and explosions lit up the void. Zara led her strike team towards Horizon Alpha, their nimble assault craft weaving through the chaos of battle. They docked amid a hail of Vorta fire, breaching the airlock with practiced efficiency. Inside, they met fierce resistance. Vorta shock troops had already overrun much of the station. Zara's team fought corridor by corridor, the tight confines amplifying the brutality of close-quarters combat. Kellara moved like a force of nature, her blade flashing as she carved through a Vorta strike team. "For Neron!" she snarled, her earlier animosity forgotten in the heat of battle. On the Allied flagship, Frank's fingers danced across tactical displays. The battle raged across multiple fronts, losses mounting on both sides. He saw an opportunity and seized it, his voice grim as he gave the order. "Target the moon. We're going to bring it down on their heads." The massive ion cannons of the Allied fleet turned their fury on the nearby celestial body. Its orbit destabilized, the moon began an inexorable descent towards Horizon Alpha. Alarms blared throughout the station. Zara's voice rang out over the comms. "All personnel, evacuate immediately. This is not a drill." As shuttles began streaming from the doomed station, a new threat emerged. General Haskell's face appeared on screens throughout the Allied fleet, twisted with rage. "No more alien agendas. Terran lives matter." Haskell's forces seized control of several ion cannon batteries, opening fire on their own allies. Frank swore, diverting precious resources to quell the mutiny. "Zara, we've got problems here. You need to get off that station now." Aboard Horizon Alpha, Zara and her team fought their way to the last remaining shuttles. Neron's voice crackled over the comm. "Go! I will delay their reinforcements." "Neron, no!" Zara shouted, but it was too late. The Vulcan had sealed himself in a critical junction, buying time with his life. The last shuttles escaped as Horizon Alpha collided with the descending moon. The resulting explosion consumed a significant portion of the Vorta ground forces, leaving Thraxus's strike team in disarray. As the dust settled, both sides licked their wounds. The Allied forces had survived, but at a terrible cost. Thraxus's fury manifested in a chilling new threat, a massive cannon designed to render entire worlds uninhabitable. "Athenia," Thraxus's voice boomed across all frequencies. "Your pitiful resistance ends now." Zara and Frank locked eyes, a silent understanding passing between them. There was only one option left. "Prep a stealth insertion craft," Zara ordered. "We're taking the fight to Thraxus himself." The stealth insertion craft sliced through the void, its cloaking systems rendering it nearly invisible against the backdrop of stars. Inside, Zara gripped the tactical display, studying the massive bulk of Thraxus's flagship looming before them. "We've got one shot at this," she said, her voice low. "Frank, you're on point. Kelleria, watch our six. The craft latched onto the flagship's hull with a muted thud. Cutting torches flared to life, carving through layers of armor. As the makeshift airlock cycled, Zara's team surged forward into the bowels of the enemy vessel. Alarms blared almost immediately. Vorta security troops poured into the corridors, energy weapons blazing. Frank dove for cover, returning fire with practiced precision. So much for the element of surprise. They fought their way through deck after deck, the ship's layout a maze of twisting passageways and fortified choke points. Zara's muscles burned with exertion, but she pushed on, driven by the knowledge of what was at stake. As they neared the bridge access corridor, a hulking figure stepped into view. The Vorta elite guard towered over them, its armor jam-packed with weaponry. "You will go no further," it growled. Kelleria's eyes narrowed. "Watch me!" She sprang forward, her blade a blur of motion. The guard's energy shield flared and crackled under the assault. But Kelleria pressed on. With a final devastating strike, she shattered the shield and plunged her weapon deep into the guard's chest. "Impressive," Frank muttered as they rushed past the fallen foe. Deep within the command decks, they found their target, the firing control systems for the planet-killer weapon. But a shimmering force field blocked their path, impervious to their attacks. "We need to find another way," Zara began, but her words died in her throat as a cold voice cut through the air. "I'm afraid your little insurgency ends here." Overlord Thraxus stepped into view, flanked by his personal guard. His eyes gleamed with malice as he regarded the intruders. Zara and Frank moved as one, engaging Thraxus in a furious duel. Energy blades clashed and sparked as they battled across the chamber. Thraxus was a whirlwind of lethal grace, centuries of combat experience evident in every move. "Kelleria, we need a diversion," Zara shouted between parries. The warrior nodded grimly. "On it! Try not to die while I'm gone." She sprinted from the chamber, already barking orders into her comm unit. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the battle raged. Zara's arms trembled with fatigue, and she could see Frank's movements growing sluggish. Thraxus pressed his advantage, a cruel smile playing across his features. "Your resistance was always futile," the Vorta overlord sneered. "Even now my planet killer charges. Athenia will burn, and your pathetic alliance will crumble." Frank's eyes met Zara's, a silent understanding passing between them. He stepped forward, energy blade held high. "Then let's settle this, you and me, one-on-one." Thraxus's laughter was cold and mocking, but he took the bait. The two circled each other, Frank's drive a stark contrast to the Vorta's arrogance. Their duel was a blur of strikes and countermoves, a deadly dance where the slightest misstep meant death. Frank fought with everything he had, pushing himself beyond his limits. His innovative tactics kept Thraxus off balance, slowly wearing down the Vorta's defenses. Just as Frank gained the upper hand, Zara's voice crackled over the comm. "We've found a way to overload the firing controls. Frank, we need those command codes." Frank's blade hovered at Thraxus's throat. "It's over. Give us the codes, or you die here and now." Fury twisted Thraxus's features, but he relayed the information. Zara's fingers flew across the control panel, initiating the overload sequence. The ship shuddered violently as explosions tore through the weapon chamber. "We need to move now," Zara shouted. They fought their way to the launch bays, commandeering a shuttle amidst the chaos. As they prepared for launch, Frank hesitated at the airlock. "Go," he said, his voice firm. "I'll hold them off." Zara wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes brooked no dissent. She nodded once, then sealed the airlock as Frank turned to face the oncoming Vorta forces. As the shuttle rocketed away from the crippled flagship, Zara caught a final glimpse of Frank through the view screen. He stood tall amidst the chaos, energy blade raised high, ready to face whatever came next. The shuttle streaked away from Thraxus's flagship, explosions blossoming in its wake. Zara's hands trembled on the controls, adrenaline still surging through her veins. She allowed herself a moment to mourn Frank's sacrifice before refocusing on the task at hand. "All Allied forces, this is Commander Hernandez," she broadcast. "Thraxus's planet killer is neutralized. Converge on the flagship. We're taking it." A chorus of acknowledgments crackled over the comm. Zara piloted the shuttle back towards the massive vessel, now listing in space, its weapons silent. Swarms of Allied fighters and assault craft swarmed around it, methodically disabling its remaining defenses. Keller's voice cut through the chatter. "I've identified a breach point near the command deck. We can insert there." Zara nodded grimly. "Take us in." The shuttle glided through the debris field, dodging stray energy blasts and chunks of twisted metal. With surgical precision, Kellara maneuvered them into the gaping wound in the flagship's hull. They touched down in a cavernous hangar bay, its atmospheric containment fields flickering weakly. Zara and her strike team disembarked, weapons at the ready. The ship's corridors were a maze of sparking conduits and emergency lighting. They encountered pockets of Vorta resistance, but the enemy's will to fight had been broken. Many surrendered without a shot fired. "We need to secure the data vaults," Zara ordered as they reached a central junction. "That's where the real prize is." They fought their way deeper into the ship's core, bypassing layers of security. Finally, they reached a massive vault door, its locking mechanisms glowing an angry red. "Stand back," Kellara growled, unslinging a compact fusion cutter from her back. The device hummed to life, its white-hot beam slowly carving through the reinforced metal. As the door fell away, Zara's team surged forward. Banks of quantum computers lined the walls, their displays flickering with streams of data. Zara approached a central terminal, her fingers flying across the alien interface. "By the gods," she breathed, her face illuminated by the harsh glow of the screens. "Frank, are you seeing this?" There was a moment of painful silence before she remembered. Swallowing hard, she continued her analysis. "It's worse than we thought. Thraxus wasn't just building a planet killer. He had plans for a bioweapon, a virus targeting specific genetic markers. It could wipe out entire species." Kellara snarled, her fists clenching. "The Trallian genome would be an easy target for such a weapon. We must destroy this abomination." Zara shook her head. "Not yet. We need to analyze this data, find out how far their research progressed. There could be other facilities we don't know about." She tapped her comm unit. "This is Commander Hernandez to all Allied forces. The Vorta flagship is secure. I want every scrap of data from this ship cataloged and analyzed. Priority 1 is locating any bioweapons research facilities." As her orders were relayed across the fleet, Zara stared at the scrolling data before her. The magnitude of what they'd uncovered settled heavily on her shoulders. The war wasn't over. It had only entered a new, even more dangerous phase. "Kellara," she said, her voice tight with nearly unleashed fury. "Assemble our best strike teams. We're going hunting." "Hunting down Vraka's forces. We need to end this before it spirals out of control." Zara's words hung in the air as the gravity of their situation settled over the assembled team. The databanks of Thraxus's flagship held secrets that could reshape the galaxy, but they also presented a new set of challenges that threatened to unravel everything they had fought for. Months passed, and the Allied forces worked tirelessly to establish order in the wake of the Vorta Empire's collapse. Zara found herself thrust into a role she had never anticipated, not just a military commander, but a diplomat and peacekeeper. On the colony world of New Horizon, Zara stood before a crowd of human settlers, their faces etched with suspicion and barely suppressed anger. "We understand your concerns," she began, her voice firm but empathetic. "But we must move forward together, all species united." A rock sailed through the air, narrowly missing her head. Shouts erupted from the crowd. "No more alien lies! Humans first!" Zara's security detail moved to intercept, but she held up a hand. "Stand down," she ordered, her eyes scanning the seething mass of people before her. This wasn't a battle that could be won with force. As she opened her mouth to speak again, a piercing scream cut through the air. In the crowd, a Trallian diplomat crumpled to the ground, dark blood oozing from a wound in his chest. Chaos erupted as colonists and aliens alike scrambled for cover. Kellara's voice crackled over the comm. "Zara, we've got a situation. Sniper, northeast quadrant. I'm in pursuit." "Negative, Kellara," Zara barked. "Fall back and secure the perimeter. We can't risk..." Her words were cut off by the sound of another shot. This time, it was Kellara who cried out in pain. Zara's heart hammered in her chest as she sprinted towards her friend's last known position. She found Kellara slumped against a wall, her hand pressed to a rapidly spreading stain on her side. "It's not as bad as it looks," the Trallian warrior gasped, her normally stoic features twisted with pain. Before Zara could respond, a new wave of violence erupted. Trallian security forces, enraged by the attack on their comrade, opened fire on the human crowd. The situation spiraled out of control in a matter of seconds. Zara's mind raced. She had to act fast or risk losing everything they had worked for. With a heavy heart, she keyed her comm unit. "This is Commander Hernandez. Initiate Protocol Omega. I repeat, initiate Protocol Omega." Within minutes, Allied dropships descended from the sky. Heavily armed peacekeepers poured out, their weapons trained on both humans and aliens alike. Zara's voice boomed over the loudspeakers. "By the authority vested in me by the Galactic Alliance, I hereby declare martial law on New Horizon. All civilians are ordered to return to their homes immediately." As the riot was quelled and the wounded tended to, Zara stood alone on the now empty street. The weight of her decision pressed down on her like a physical force. She had maintained order, but at what cost? Her comm unit chirped, and Frank's voice filled her ear. "Zara, we've got a problem. Our supply convoy to Outpost 7 was just hit. It's Vraka. She's making her move." Zara's expression resolute. "Understood. Prep a strike team. We're going hunting." As she strode towards the waiting shuttle, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The war might be over, but the real battle for the galaxy's future was just beginning.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.